Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast, where we share bold insights and real stories for people leaders building cultures and companies that scale. I'm your host, Desiree B. Sharp, keynote speaker and CEO of Color Vision Lab. We're the people and culture consulting firm helping creative businesses design smarter systems and build high-performing teams. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Kathleen Lucente, CEO and founder at Redfan Communications. If you want to scale your business without sacrificing your culture, this is the conversation for you. And if you're exploring ways to elevate your people strategy, DM us the word growth on LinkedIn for a free consultation. Kathleen, welcome to Bright Ideas. How are you today?
I'm great, Desiree. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for today's chat. So let's dive in, shall we? I would love for you to share a little bit about your journey and that led you to founding your firm, Redfan Communications. If you could give us a little bit of overview, that'd be a great place to kick off the conversation.
That sounds like a good spot. I have now been running Redfan for 17 years. And really the idea of running my own agency had been in the back of my mind probably after I had worked at a large PR firm in New York City, and then went and worked at IBM Research, and then worked at a boutique PR firm in New York City, and got to see kind of the things I like, the things I didn't like. I was also managing agencies as well when I was on the corporate side at IBM Research. And so, and then, fast forward, then I was at JP Morgan managing agencies both in New York and then across 18 countries in Asia. When you kind of bring that all together, I finally, after, I've now been doing this for over 30 years, I finally started to kind of really put the pieces together around what I loved about the agencies I got to work with when I was managing them, and also some of the culture things that I saw a real disconnect on. And so some of the things that I did see was most agencies, have billing rates and things of that nature, but their employees don't have a sense of financial transparency. They don't really understand how they're, helping to win the game, right? And help with the business goals. And then the other side of it was that I really saw this opportunity. Most agencies have a system where you start at the bottom and you have to kind of jump through all these hoops. When I came into the agency world, I had come in actually from being a journalist. And so I had to learn. I already had my master's degree. I had been writing about high tech, and I had been lucky enough to be at my first agency up in Boston, where they really saw the value of my skill set and let me blossom. And I kept holding on to that and thinking, you know what, that is really important. So I created a services section of my team. So if you're an incredible writer or a credible media relations person or researcher, you can still really rise to the top at my agency and not get blocked. And then if you're a client services person who's brought companies public and done M&A and really loves being in touch with the client all the time, you can be in our client services or client success team. So it's client success and client services. And when that works together, it helps people with their careers, but it also is better for the client. And so this is a new model that I've introduced, and I see our clients loving it. And I also see people really being able to be trusted advisors and be their best selves and then financially do quite well versus kind of the slog that, unfortunately, it's a high burnout industry. And if you can create the right systems, you can change that. And so that's something I've been very much focused on.
I think it's really amazing how you've been able to disrupt these kind of industry norms in the comm space. You don't hear many agencies valuing, or really they have values, but they don't really live out those values and how they work and how they engage teams and clients. Would you say that your decision to really instill values that you uphold in your own personal life as a leader in your company, was that informed at all by your time spent abroad? I know you spent some time living in other countries. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that was really an eye-opener for me when I first got out to Hong Kong, I was originally supposed to be there for 3 months, and I wound up being there for 5.5 years and actually giving birth to my first child there. So very different. But one of the things I realized was when you truly partner with the C-suite. So I was partnering with HR. And one of the things that caught me off guard when I was first got out there was I had a call from Bloomberg saying, we heard you just fired so-and-so and so-and-so. And I thought, why am I getting blindsided by this? So I really, values start at home. And so I really had to sit down with the CEO and the head of HR out there and say, hey guys, if we're going to be the A team out here, we need to work together around transparency. We need to understand what the narrative is around a story of, maybe we were letting go of some people, but we were also hiring. We were reframing the system and to better serve our clients. And we were not ahead of the narrative. And we were allowing the market to dictate how things were going to be told. And I said, look, we got to change that. So one of my values at Redfan is courageous conversations. And that's really important both internally with people so we can do our best work and also with our clients. So that's really important. Another one is fire in the belly. I'm a competitive person and I think that's a positive thing. We want to win for our clients and we want to show up with a spark happening. And we look to attract clients that have those values, right? That appreciate a courageous conversation, that appreciate transparency, that appreciate those types of things. So, that is all very important. And then on top of it, at Redfan, one of the things I did was I created we have a thing called Values in Action. And this is an award program that is dictated by colleagues. So it's not Kathleen as the CEO saying, hey, you did a good job, you're getting this. Every quarter, we have our own team members vote on who really exhibited our values and in what ways did they do that. And we, celebrate that and they get, an award. They're able to go purchase something of their own liking, but we celebrate it internally. And I think that's super, super important. We also have my CFO come in and do an overview of where we are financially every quarter. So there's no hiding. And also we have a bonus structure. One of the things I learned, unfortunately, at a lot of agencies, they don't have bonus structures. They don't offer transparency. And so, and I found that at one of the agencies I worked for in New York, while the C-suite was busy buying themselves cars and, getting a new apartment in New York City and asking people to come over to it, and using it as a business expense, it became very apparent to me that while I was getting a bonus, I was not getting a pool of money to reward my staff. And that disturbed me deeply. And I kind of kept that tucked in my mind as when I start my own agency, I want to make sure that that's different. And so I'm very proud of the fact that culture comes first. And my team knows I put my money where my mouth is and that they know that, we rally together. And it's a lot more fun to be that way.
Kathleen, you mentioned that you partner directly with the C-suite, and you talked about your values of courageous conversations. I love that. And it made me think about change management and how difficult it can be to get an organization, to get senior leaders to think differently and to adopt a whole different framework of thinking. So I would love to learn a little bit more about what are some of the challenges or themes or insights that you've been able to draw from having those courageous conversations with leaders and trying to get them to live by their values or to adopt new ways of thinking?
Well, I would say, internally, I'm constantly challenging us to think differently and be thinking ahead for our clients and be reading the latest things, being very familiar, for example, with right now in the world of zero click, right? You've got a situation where a lot of CMOs and executives probably were counting on looking at the numbers coming in for SEO as their lead indicator and the sales team's putting pressure on them. The reality is because Google has changed those algorithms and now we have AI really, kind of front and center, we're spending a lot of time educating and taking the time to educate executives on, remember how you have a thought leadership program. You need to increase this, and here's why. And here's where you're showing up. If somebody types in who's the top, agriculture technical company, if you're not showing up, people are not going to find you. And so we're really also educating them on how do you change, right now in particular, as you look at planning for your budget for 2026, maybe you're taking that SEO budget and starting to change that. And then how do you break down silos, right? So one of the things I learned working at big corporations and in particular, I would say in the investment banking side in New York, I really saw a lot of siloing in corporate communications. You had internal comms, you had external comms, you had a totally different floor for advertising and promotions. And there was very little coming together to do group think or hive mind. And I feel like when I was in Asia overseeing 18 countries and I was in charge of those teams, I could really bring people together to do that and then have faster conversations. And so here, what we do is we actually bring executives together to go really test, like, how is your narrative working? Is everyone on the same page? We look at what's going on with internal communications. We'll talk to the chief people officer to really understand, hey, I see the rankings are low. Is there something about communications that's not happening effectively? Maybe we need to do a different survey and then help the C-suite understand how to invest in internal communications as much as they want to invest in external communications. So I think we look for clients that are open to those discussions, Desiree. And that's in those early conversations. There's a lot of questions we ask as we're meeting a potential client to kind of see, is this going to be a relationship where we can have that type of dialogue? Because that's going to be critical to our success together.
You kind of already touched on some trends that are impacting your work. And I think that that's a good segue. You talked about one click. You talked about really bolstering thought leadership, especially when you have things like AI, really making its way into every industry, right? So in today's PR and communications landscape, what shifts are you seeing that agency leaders and their clients just simply can't afford to ignore? What do they really need to be paying attention to?
Well, I think there's a big reaction to AI, and I think there's an important reason for that. So I do believe that you need to look at your thought leadership, and you also need to look at your SEO budget and start to understand, do you have the right partners in place? If you've got an SEO partner that's not talking about how to tackle the AI side, but they're just pushing on, keep doing what you're doing, that's usually a red flag for me. So I like to make sure that people are doing an assessment and also doing assessment in AI. Where are you showing up versus your competition? Where are your executives showing up? Are the questions that you're hoping if a customer would be asking, are you showing up in that conversation in AI? So there's an audit that can be done that I do believe is really, really important. But I also think that we're seeing a number of other challenges. Right now, I see a lot of pretty well-funded companies not putting the time and investment into internal communications, or thinking that, just doing a town hall here or there is good. And there's very often a disconnect between who owns internal communications within a company. Is it the chief people officer? Is the head of marketing? Are they supposed to be coming together? And really the C-suite, the CEO should be setting that standard and expectation versus just saying, hey, you guys figure it out. It needs to be valued as something that's extremely important. Your employees are your best asset. And when you're going through M&A, which right now a lot of companies are going through quite a bit of M&A, we're seeing that often that gets lost in the shuffle. People are so focused on closing the deal, they're not thinking about, oh, we have a big customer conference coming up. How are the executives from this combined company going to show up and be able to be a unified communication machine, right? How are we starting to think about, making sure that our employees understand the vision, and they also understand that there's going to be some bumps in the road, and we appreciate them helping to smooth those over, internally, right? So this gets back to values and transparency, and it's once again just a critical part of a culture that needs to be factored in. We do when it comes to M&A. The other thing that we see a lot happen is that we call it just stakeholder communication. So it's not just your employees; it's who are the customers that are going to be most annoyed if they find out about a merger and acquisition through a press release. Are they going to want a phone call from somebody that's more high touch? So we go through a list with that C-suite and say, okay, I call it play the tape. Like, let's play the tape forward And imagine if you don't do these things, what's going to be the fallout, right? So helping people think, who are all the audiences that need to, or they're going to find out when that press release hits, and how would it go differently if you actually created a communication strategy that made them feel treated special and known, and seen.
I find that to be so interesting, specifically, when we speak about mergers and acquisitions. I'm thinking about an experience that I had as an employee. I was an employee of Turner Broadcasting when they were being acquired by AT&T. I was not there when it turned into Warner Brothers Discovery and so on and so forth. But I remember the culture of Turner just being, it was just a magical place. It was so fun and so innovative. And, they called it the golden handcuffs. Some companies have that where
Yeah.
you're just so comfortable and you may not have the highest salary, or you may not be able to advance as quickly in your career in some divisions, but you just had fun and, at your job. And as these conversations were happening, AT&T was just a different culture. They came in, they were very, very corporate, very little stuffy, and the Turner folks just didn't respond well at that time, and it was scary, to say the least.
Oh,
People were
yeah.
wondering, what would this mean for me? How would work change? What would it now feel like
Yeah.
with this massive organization coming in with a completely different culture from what we know? So I think that came to mind as you were talking.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say that that was felt, this is way back, but when JP Morgan and Chase merged, there were, lots of comments on the fact that Chase, executives were wearing khakis, and, the investment bankers were wearing, top end suits, right? And, we actually fell into a model of co-heads, which created that was the first time I've ever gone through an M&A where co-heads were established. So, investment bank had someone from Chase and someone from JP Morgan. I was overseeing Lab Morgan, which was basically an incubator attached to our VC side of things, where we were investing in spinning off companies from the bank as well as other financial tool companies. And it was really fascinating to just see the culture. And in some cases, it worked really beautifully, but you knew at some point there was going to be a change. And it's funny, I think it was only a few years ago that there was still talking in the news about dress code. I'm like, this merger took place so long ago. And it's just kind of funny that it takes, that I looked at that and like, gosh, I've been gone so long and they're still talking about this, right? So some things take longer than others from a culture. But I'm sure, that company's running beautifully. It's just that it's hard to let go of certain aspects if you see yourself as a banker in a certain way, how you dress. Even when I was in Asia, I was in charge of a four-way merger out there, and we had a British company, an Australian company, and JP Morgan Chase, which that was really interesting because you could tell the investment bankers that were coming from Jardine Fleming, they wore like David Bowie like pants and like, had flippant hair, and they had just a whole different debonair approach compared to some of the other guys. And it was funny. You could just based on looking, like there was just this is how we walk. This is how we are. And I think it was kind of cool in many ways to see that combine, because you got a stronger environment. They could actually think, okay, well, this client really likes this person, and maybe we go in together, right, and strengthen the relationship. And so, while it might look like it's going to be difficult, if it's presented in a positive way and collaboration is encouraged, and also financial rewards are together versus taken away, you then don't get this kind of begrudging environment. You get an environment where people start to collaborate. And the biggest thing that's really interesting is when you do not handle the communications externally and internally around M&A really well, your competition has a great opportunity to start reaching out to your customers to say, you know what, they're going through an M&A. They're going to be a mess for a while. I heard it's a disaster over there. I've actually seen that kind of behavior before. And so you do yourself a great service by making sure that things are extremely buttoned up and that your employees can say, things are going great. So, you lose more than great employees when you don't pull it together.
as you're talking, I mean, granted, this is not my world. I'm learning so much just from hearing you speak about this space, but it's making me draw on just personal experiences. And now I'm thinking about the show Suits.
Yes.
I'm thinking about that show. And I mean, granted, it's a fantastic show, but some of the stuff on there, I'm just like, I don't know how much of this is real. But as you're talking through it, I'm like, how your competition can kind of come in and take your clients when you've shown some signs of weakness.
Oh, yeah.
It applies to the real business world.
Oh, the things that I've seen, I mean, when I was in Asia, I had competitors, other investment banks, sending fake notes to reporters. And then the reporter would bring it to me and say, this investment bank is saying that this deal is actually getting booked by them and not by your guys, and that you guys are doing a terrible job. And I would say, you know what? Talk about transparency. Meet me out the elevator bank. I'm going to bring you straight up to the trading floor, and we're going to look at the screen, and you can see how it's getting booked. And then you'll know who to trust, right?
I heard that.
So I don't play that game. You want, we're going truth.
I know that's
There's
right.
some
That's the
snakes in the
energy I
grass
like.
out there. You got to watch out.
That is the energy I love, Kathleen. Just such like boss energy. So I want to go back a little bit earlier in the conversation. I'm so intrigued by the concept around involving your employees and just the voting decisions around clients. It's such a different concept. It's not one that I've ever heard. Is this something that you introduce to your employees when they're onboarded, or were most of your team in place when you implemented this initiative? And what was their feedback on it after you did your first vote?
I think a couple things. Number one, this was brought to my attention years ago when I moved to a big agency in New York City named Ketchum, which was a fantastic experience for me. And I was brought in really as the first tech PR person within that company in the New York office. And one of the cool things that I found was they asked me that question. They said, is there anything you will not work on that just does not fit with your values? And at the time, I remember thinking, gosh, no one's ever asked me that question. Remember, I'm probably 25 years old at the time, right? And I said, I'm in the tech industry. But in particular, I probably would not want to work on anything to do with tobacco. I've had family members die from cancer who are smokers, and I don't want to represent a company that is proliferating that. And I probably would not want to do anything that has to do with killing people, like guns or war-related things that would be in conflict with my ethics. And so that was really, really the first time that was asked of me. And so I first of all, number one, appreciated that it showed me something about the values of that company and specifically that management team at the time when I was there. And I carried that forward with me and thought, I think that's a really important thing to ask, because when you're in charge of public relations for a client, you're in charge of looking out for their reputation. You really are investing in them and the team, and you're really kind of, like I said, you're in it to win. You're helping them win, and it's very hard for somebody to do that in a very authentic way if they're thinking this client is doing things I don't believe in. And so I think that we had at one point SeaWorld approach us, and we really liked the woman who had just become the marketing person over there at the time, and we had been told that they were going to make some major changes, and we did a vote on if they were making the changes, we might be willing to help. But if they're not, and they can't say that they are, we wouldn't be able to. So we really had a conversation. We decided to at least take the meeting, and after that meeting, we got a read that this didn't feel like it was we weren't getting the confirmation we needed. And actually the person that we had been told was really fantastic there left within 3 months later. She too obviously discovered that it wasn't going to be a good fit for her. I'm not sure what they're doing now, but ethically it did not align with my team. And so I really appreciate it, and I think they appreciated that type of thing. So this is the kind of thing that we look at. We also look at say we have a new business meeting. The company has been screened. They meet our criteria. We meet their criteria. We have a meeting. We still want to meet the C-suite. We want to see, is this CEO and the C-suite, how do we feel about them? Is there good chemistry? Do we feel like they're going to be engaged in the process? So at the end of those meetings, we sit down and ask ourselves, together as a team, how are we feeling about this? Should we even put a proposal together? We do not just send out proposals because somebody calls and says, we want a proposal. It doesn't matter how much money you have. We want to make sure that there's going to be a good fit. Our reputation is getting invested in this as well, and my team needs to feel good about it. That's also why I don't take on just crisis comm for any company. We only do crisis comm for clients we're working with, that we have a working relationship, because we already know what their ethics are. We've already been working with them, right? So we kind of understand. Whereas there are agencies that will take, hey, like there's a major oil spill, somebody's got to take it on. Whether they believe the company is telling the truth or not, that's, to be discussed, right? And so I think, those are the types of things that if the client's already a client and they're willing to put a crisis plan together with us, a proactive one, then we're willing to help them with their crisis work. If they want to just try to build a plane while the crisis is happening and they don't want to invest, that's also a red flag. So these are the types of things we look for. And we're only a 13-person team here in Austin, Texas. Then we have staff in Asheville and San Diego. And so we need to pick clients very carefully every year. And we pick clients that are with us from, 3 to 7 years. So they really stay and grow.
That is deeply inspiring. It's just great to hear as a young woman leader myself, hearing you talk about some of those early career experiences when you were at Ketchum and, you had someone who asked you about what your values were, what you were comfortable with. At 25 years old, I'm thinking about where I was mentally, where I was in my career, the lack of boundaries that I had, the grit, the drive. I just wanted to get ahead. And I think that when you have that posture, it can be easy to just say yes to anything. And I think particularly for women who want to be in leadership, women who want to lead companies, it takes a while sometimes to build that muscle to be able to create healthy boundaries and say, no, this feels good. This doesn't feel good. This poses a risk to my reputation, to my company. This doesn't. And that was one thing that was really powerful that stood out to me about you in our initial conversation is that you just have this aura about you, this posture that it doesn't, there's no air of desperation. There's just this confidence that I can tell you probably have had for a very long time. So,
well, Desiree, I was grounded most of junior high. My father is an attorney. He's now passed, but he was a really high ethics guy. And if I talk back, he'd say, hey, we need to talk about how do you communicate more effectively, right? So I feel like I had some really good values early on. I think that base of values is so important to have or to get a mentor soon, to do that. I also saw early on, I was traveling from Boston to Texas early on in my first PR agency career. I was representing Motorola here in Austin, Texas, and I was living in Boston. And one of the things I also, I found even when I was a high-tech journalist was I would not date people that I was working with. And I remember coming home and being told I was an ice princess. And, I wouldn't go out party. I'd go out for drinks, but I was like, I knew when to leave, and there were others who didn't, and things happened, and I'd hear about it later, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so glad I left, right? So just, as a young woman, I think that's so important to know those boundaries and just to hold it. And while it didn't feel good at age 25 to be called an ice princess, when I, of course, wanted to be liked, but also be professional, I think that's just, something that, some of us as women, we go through that, right? And it's not okay. It's not it's unfortunate. But when you know what your values are and how you want to be respected at the end of the day, and how you want to be perceived in a business environment and in your personal, you kind of have to almost have your own vision board for that, right? And by the way, I've never created a vision board, but I kind of have one in my mind, right? I think I've always had one. And I think it's just cool because you know what your North Star is. You know when things feel weird, like you're like, oh no, we're going to go.
Yes, definitely, I can relate to that. I've done vision boards. This is my 2nd year.
Mhm.
Last year, I did really well with kind of things coming to pass, but I don't know, this year is going a little rocky, so we'll see.
It
We'll
happens. It
see.
happens. We got
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Clearly, you're a fantastic leader. You have a great business and a brand that you've built that's very well respected in your space. But with every business, we have challenges, right? We have bottlenecks, friction, as we grow, just new hurdles arise. So for you, what are some of the challenges that you're tackling this season in your business?
Well, I think the biggest challenge probably today is starting to look. We have a thing called the raving fans score. So internally, we have our team sit down and look at how are we doing with each client. If we were to call them today, would they give us a testimonial? Is there anything we could be doing better? And we score that every single month to be really making sure we're looking ahead. I think the biggest challenge I've seen is that in the Zoom world, we've gotten to a point where sitting down as humans together has like fallen off, and really getting clients, no matter where they are in the United States, to recognize that like coming together in person, once every other quarter is so important for the things that you can't get across in a Zoom, the relational aspects, that investment in time. So that's something I'm really committing in talking to my team about, like, hey, we got to push on that with our clients. Like let's build that into our scopes of work. Like this is where we are able to sit down with people face to face as opposed to rushed Zoom calls and kind of, dig in, maybe have a meal together. That's an investment I think that's well worth it for both sides every single time. I think that's really, really important. I also believe that believe it or not, our industry, helping people understand that public relations agencies are doing a lot more than press relations and really educating them on why and how to use your agency in much more effective ways. Believe it or not, I was just on the phone with a company that was looking for someone to help with a big funding announcement, but then had a separate person reaching out to other agencies about brand narrative work. We do both, right? Um, they hadn't seen that. It's on our website, it's everywhere, but really having to like educate and realize you don't have to go to two separate agencies necessarily for that. In fact, if you can have your PR agency do that deep dive research and then do the media relations, the pull through value is significant versus siloing, right? And this gets back to that siloing issue that you often see when people don't understand how to run a marketing team and how to scale a marketing team. So I spent a lot of time really educating on that. I just did a talk at the BBB here in town. They have an incubator called Ignite. And I gave a talk on how small businesses need to build out their brand narrative and why that's so important and how that's a revenue driver. And so, I'd rather give away that time for free and educate people up front so they don't go off and make a lot of financial mistakes and then come to us and go, hey, we did this. And we go, oh, we have to take that all apart. Right. So on the an employee, I think recruiting is always a really hard thing in our industry. Finding a good culture fit, especially when you're a small team, having the wrong dynamic can ruffle things real fast. And so we're very, very thorough in our interviewing process and our reference checking and just kind of getting chemistry check. I think that's super important. I've seen where we've made a hire where it didn't. You could feel the tension and it wasn't smoothing out. And no matter what we did, it was like, we missed something here, and they're not feeling great either. So having been in this owning my own agency now for 17 years, you can imagine that's happened, but it's rare. And I'm glad that it's not, a common. We've learned on how to recruit better, how to interview better, how to get more people involved in the process. The same way we do looking at a client, right? Like, how are we looking at this client? Are they a good fit? but also making sure we're bringing diversity of thinking to everything we do. And one of the things I love is that if you look at the people on our team, they're not all people who are PR people. They're former journalists. They're, former researchers. So that brings a different level of thinking to a client engagement, and different lenses, and appreciating the different points of view is so important. And so building teams where people aren't afraid of different points of view is also super, super important. And we look for clients that want that.
I agree wholly in everything that you shared, and very interesting, some of the concepts just around diversity of thinking and how you approach hiring and retention, but totally agree in the value of having inclusive teams and how they
So
accelerate
important.
business growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
And respect. I mean, mutual respect internally is usually where you see something isn't right, right? Like there's somebody who, and I saw that even in other industries where you see maybe somebody keeps somebody on board that is maybe they're a top performer, but they're not showing respect to their team members, and that can create a lot of problems in a company. I've seen that, of course, in investment banking. If somebody is a top performer, you're like, gosh, we can't get rid of them, but the amount of damage they can do internally, and create kind of ill will is also something that management always has to weigh. And so helping companies. I had a really interesting situation where a CEO I was working with, I did a crisis plan with him, and I was evaluating his executive team, and I realized his head of HR had been a recruiter, but she hadn't really been an HR person, and so there was a lot of gaps. And being able to have that courageous conversation and sitting down and saying, I think you've got, you're gonna, if something went wrong, this person isn't yet ready. They don't have the mentor. They have no one above them to like bring them up to that right now. And so, helping the C-suite see where there's opportunities to actually put someone else in to help grow that person, or see where the issues may be, is also something that we see because we're talking to so many people within a company. We're often seeing things that the executive team isn't seeing, and that's a real value where you're able to bring, have that courageous conversations, constructive feedback. And one of my favorite things to do with every client is to say a checkpoint, right? So a checkpoint is three things you think we're doing well and three areas where you think we could improve. And we also do the same to them because it takes teamwork for us to work well together. And then when you're able to have that level of conversation, um, it's you can do great things together.
Kathleen, I have so enjoyed this conversation. You've shared a tremendous amount of gems and just good energy. I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the same question I ask all my guests, and that's, what is the one bright idea that you would leave with the audience? So your bright idea could be a mindset shift, a strategy, a tool, a book, a podcast, something that is making a difference for you. What would that one bright idea be?
One of the things that I've been trying to really get across to CEOs and to really understand that, number one, when you think of marketing and communications, you need to think of it as your revenue bridge. And I believe that when you build authority, you get access. When you build credibility, you get conversions. And when you build your reputation, and long before you actually need the goodwill out there, right? You also get retention with employees, retention with customers. So that's kind of my equation. I look at that all the time and say, how are you doing on building authority, which opens up doors, right? How are you doing on building credibility? Like putting out product announcements all day is not credibility, right? Customers that are really happy, that want to talk about loving to work with you, employees that say this is the best place to work, right? What are all the elements that create credibility, or what are you doing in your community? What are you doing philanthropic, which I think is also so important. And then reputation. What does reputation mean? And how do you care for it, nurture it? And all of those things actually impact your revenue.
Kathleen, if there are individuals in the audience who want to learn more about Redfan Communications, where can they find you?
I would say come on over to redfancommunications.com, and you can also check me out on LinkedIn, of course. We also have a great newsletter you can sign up for on our website. And also our resources section on our website has lots of free guides and things like that, especially about the zero-click world and some of the things that I've been talking a little bit about. So go explore, and feel free to send me an email at kathleen@redfancommunications.com as well.
And we will be sure to include all that information in the show notes as well. Kathleen, thank you so much for your time. I loved having you on Bright Ideas today.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Bright Ideas. If today's episode gave you something to think about, here's your next step. DM me the word growth on LinkedIn to start a conversation about how we can help you scale smarter. And if you're a founder, CEO, or senior talent leader with a story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out about joining me on a future episode. And if you don't want to miss future conversations, be sure to follow the show, leave a quick rating, and download your favorite episodes to take them on the go. Your support helps more leaders discover bright ideas. Until next time, be bold, be resilient, be sharp. I'm Desiree B. Sharp.